This is the third video for a series of exercises using the Social Security baby names data. So let's go back to our data. You should have a data file. Mine is for Minnesota. You might have your own state. Our main data page that we've been working on. In the last exercise, we added a rank. For this one, let's ask another question. The first question we asked was simply, if you remember, how many babies have your name in any given year, and what did that look like over time? Well, what if we could calculate this as a percentage of all babies born in each of those years? You know, there were far more babies born in recent years than in past years, for example, and this chart might look a little bit different if we did that. So, but how would we do that? So our data tells us how many, for example, here, 216 babies were named Mary of the girls were named Mary in 2016. But how many girls were born in the state in 1910? We don't have that anywhere here in our data as a column. But this is a common thing that you might run into, that maybe you have the ingredients you need to make that. And we do. Well, remember the one caveat that this is not every baby that was born, but we get pretty darn close. We can use it as a kind of a proxy. If we simply add up how many girls were born in each year and how many boys were born in each year, we would have a total. And then we could use VLOOKUP to marry that back to this data set and use it as our denominator in our calculations. So let's start by making a pivot table to get those totals. So insert menu, go create a pivot table, and we want one row for each year so that we put the year in the rows. We want boys and girls separated out, so we'll put that in the columns. Let me make this a little bigger so you can see it better. And then we'll put the births in the values so it adds up the babies. So you can see that there were not very many in 1910, and that has to do with people signing up for Social Security or not. It was not everybody born back then got a Social Security card. So, but we have a lot more down here in 2019. So now we have this table, but it's hard to work with things in pivot tables, so I like to copy them out and make a new sheet. So I copy just the white part, and we really just need the year, the girls, and the boys. So just copy this white part. Don't take the blue part, otherwise you'll just make a whole new pivot table in your other sheet. Copy that out and make a new sheet. Leave room for your headers, and let's make sure. So it starts with the girls and then the boys. So I'm in my sheet, so I'm going to say girls, boys. So you should have a new sheet that looks something like this. Make it bigger for you. There, year, girls, and boys. So I'm going to rename this. I'm going to call it lookup. Down on the sheet tab at the bottom. Now the next thing we can do is we can make it easier to create that VLOOKUP formula like we've done in some of the earlier videos by making this table a named range. And you can name all kinds of sets of things in here. I'm going to highlight this whole chunk of code. On Windows, you can do Control-Shift asterisk while your cursor's in there. Otherwise, you can, like I like to highlight like all the columns, and then Control-Shift down, or on a Mac it should be Command-Shift down arrow. So you get the whole thing highlighted. And then if you right-mouse click, one of the options in here down at the bottom is Define Name. So click on Define Name, and it brings up a little box where you have name, scope, as a comment area, and then refers to. The refers to should be your range of your data. Lookup exclamation point A1 to C111. That's with the dollar signs in there locking it in. And then the name is what you want to call this. So I'm going to call it lookup with all capital letters, which is what the same thing that we named the sheet. The consistency will help. And the scope should be set to workbook. You can put a comment in here if you want, like to remind yourself what this was for, but you don't have to. So you can say OK. Now if you ever want to find where that is again, what you want to do is look for the name manager. And the name manager is going to show you the ranges of data that it has created. And it looks like it created a range of data for the data I imported, but the main one we care about is that lookup. So there is my named ranges that are in this data set. Okay, so now let's go back to your data page and make sure your filters are turned off. You're all set to go. We're going to add 2 new columns. We're going to add total girls and total boys. And notice that I put girls first and then boys. That's because that's the order it appears in my lookup table. Remember, girls and then boys. And it will be easier to fill out these columns with less typing if we put them in the same order. Okay, so if you remember that VLOOKUP has 3 arguments. The item you want to look up in your data table, the array or the table array where you're going to look something up, what column from that array you want to return, and then true or false, whether or not you want it to be an exact match or an approximate match. False means exact match. So when we did this in the earlier exercises, this table array portion was this big, long, bad, complicated formula. But now that we've named that range, we don't need to do that. All we need to do is put that range in here, the name of it, and Excel knows exactly where to go. Now I've added one other thing. I put a dollar sign in front of the C2. Why did I do that? So let's talk about those dollar signs and what they do. So by putting a dollar sign in front of the C, but not after the C, when I copy that formula over from the girls column to the boys column, that C will stay there and in the formula, and it won't move to D, which is what would normally happen with a formula. And I can show you this here in a second. But by not doing the dollar sign after the C, it will still allow Excel to move down the sheet like we want it to. It'll go to C3 and C4 and C5. So let's try this out here. I'm going to copy this over. So we're going to put this in the total girls column. So VLOOKUP on C2, referring to lookup, get column 2 and false. There, 5837 total girls. Now, I'm going to take that just for giggles. I'll take that dollar sign off and copy this formula across to the boys, and you'll see that it has switched to D2 and it's not working properly. But if I put if we have that dollar sign there, and then we copy across to boys, it's going to stay on C2. The only downside here is, look, we got the same number. There couldn't have been an equal number of boys and girls. The problem is that our number 2 here, the number 2, which column to grab in our lookup table, is still stuck on the girls column. We just need to change that to the boys column, which is number 3. And then we get a different one. So remember, in our lookup, the girls column is column 2, and then the boys column is column 3. There is, I've wondered if there's a nifty way to have that adjust, and haven't quite found a great solution. So this is as close as I can get. So we've copied it over, changed one little thing. Now if you highlight both of them, then get your copy tool and double click, it will fill both columns at the same time. And don't freak out that you have the same number on a whole bunch of rows. That is how it is supposed to be. but make sure it went all the way down. So why do we have the same numbers on so many rows? Well, remember, this is supposed to be a total for that year. And these are, for example, here we're looking at the 2019 rows, and we should have the same numbers for all those years. The places where it should change, though, is when you get to a new year. So let's get up to 2018. Oh, there's lots of babies. Lots of different names in 2019. Oh, let's just scroll up farther. There, 2006. Yes, we've got some different numbers here. That's good. And you can spot check this by going over to your sheet and seeing what the boy, here's the girl number, 26846, and in 2006, and going over here and finding if that's the right number. 26846, there it is. Yep, it worked. So once you've got those, you can highlight both of them and do copy, paste special values. And you can either go down to the paste special values, or you can push the little clipboard with the 1, 2, 3 on it, and that will do the same thing. There we go. Paste special values. I'm going to hit escape to get rid of my green running ants. And now we have total boys and total girls. So now we're all set to calculate what percentage each of these numbers in column E are of their respective total. But, okay, so here's our numerator in one column, but our denominators is in two different columns, and we need to use a different denominator depending on whether we're talking girls or boys. Well, guess what? We can use if statements to do that. We can look and see, is this a girl record? If so, then use the girls column as the denominator, and if it's a boys record, use the boys column. So that's a pretty simple if statement. So our if statement is going to look a little something like this. So our logical test, or the criteria, is B2 equal to F? So I'm asking, is it the girl record? You could make this, is this the boy record? Is B2 equal to M? But then you would just reverse what's in the true and the false. So think carefully about what you put in your criteria, because then that dictates what needs to go in your true and your false portions. In this case, it really doesn't matter which one you do, because it is truly a binary situation. We don't have any records that have unknown gender or anything like that. It is either F or M. There's nothing else in this data. So if it is F, then we want to take E2, which is the number of births, divided by H2, which is the total girls. If it's false, then we want to take E2, the number of births, divided by I2, which is the total boys. So we can put that in our sheet here. Hit enter. Uh-oh. Probably my copying and pasting the quotes didn't work. There we go. Yep, it doesn't like copy paste. Okay, so we can call this percent of gender. So these numbers are really small, though. It would be usually when you do something like this, you probably do it as a rate per 100,000 babies born or something like that, or per 10,000 babies born. We'll just try 100,000. You can bake that into the formula if you want by just adding some more math into each of these. So I'm going to put some parentheses around here and say times 100,000. And then remember, you have to do it on the other one as well. Times 100,000. Is that, did I do too many zeros? 100, 1, 2. Make sure you close your final if statement parenthesis. Hit enter. And we can right mouse click and format cells and get rid of some of those decimal points. Make it a number, make it no decimal points. Copy that down. Maybe percent of gender is the wrong label now. Maybe we should make it rate per 100K. So now you can go back and redo that first question about your name, and this time make it about based on that rate rather than the number of births. So we could quickly, let's go back to, remember our pivot table that we made. So this, my pivot table is the name Mary. You might have a different one. And remember, it's based on sum of num births. But if you look in your pivot table, our new columns are not showing up on here. So let's go up to the top and say pivot table analyze. And we'll start with refresh, see if that does the trick. Nope, it doesn't. So now we need to change the data source. And when you click that, you'll see, and you might not be able to see this, in this box, it's saying the table range is from A1 to E, and then a big fat number. Well, we added a whole bunch of columns, so we're now going all the way over to J. So you just need to change the E to a J and say OK. And now all those columns, yep, there they are. They're in there. So instead of num births, we can add the rate per 100K. And there we go. I'm going to highlight this and format the cells to get rid of those decimal points. And now we could, I'm going to copy that over to my Mary sheet, and we'll just change it. This is rate per 100K. And our chart should have automatically adjusted. Yep, it did. It looks pretty much the same, but this is the more accurate way to measure the rates.